If you look at cities like Dubai or Riyadh today, you see places that completely defy their geography. We've built shimmering, hyper-modern metropolises in environments that are aggressively hostile to human settlement. The math here is incredibly unforgiving. The broader Middle East houses about 6% of the global population, but it holds less than 2% of the world's renewable freshwater. This data shows exactly how these societies survive. They rely entirely on what researchers call fossil fuel water, desalination. Kuwait sources 90% of its drinking water from these plants. In Saudi Arabia, it's 70%. Without these massive industrial boilers and filters, these cities literally cannot exist. To meet that demand, the region has invested $53 billion in desalination infrastructure since 2006. Today, the Middle East alone accounts for over 40% of total global desalination capacity. Look closely at the edge of town, and the reality becomes clear. These aren't natural ecosystems. They are highly artificial constructs, entirely dependent on a continuous, mechanical lifeline to hold the desert at bay. But to keep pace with explosive urban growth, the strategy had to shift. Instead of building many small facilities, the industry moved toward enormous centralized megaplants. On average, a modern plant is 10 times larger than it was just 15 years ago. The scale of these facilities is staggering. The largest among them can pump out 1 million cubic meters of water every single day. That's enough output from one location to sustain hundreds of thousands of people. This structure highlights a critical architectural flaw. If an oil pipeline breaks, the grid can often reroute the crude around the damage. A desalination plant is a rigid, sequential chain, meaning if just one high-pressure valve or membrane fails, the entire facility goes offline. And because most Gulf cities only keep a few days' worth of emergency water in storage, these ultra-efficient megaplants have become critically exposed single points of failure. Now, that fragile lifeline is under pressure from 3 converging threats. The first is immediate: climate change. The Middle East and North Africa region is currently warming at roughly twice the global average. This loop creates a brutal mechanical cycle. Extreme heat drives a massive spike in air conditioning. That requires more electricity, which in turn demands more cooling water. This endless cycle forces aging membranes and pipelines to run hotter and harder than they were designed for. It's not just the heat. Warmer coastal waters are breeding massive, harmful algal blooms. When this thick biological sludge hits a plant's intake valves, it completely fouls the system, frequently forcing operators into emergency shutdowns. The irony is sharp. The exact infrastructure built to help these populations survive climate extremes is having its operational lifespan systematically eroded by those very same climate shifts. The second threat comes from geopolitics. Because these megaplants are fixed, irreplaceable choke points, they have evolved into highly prized targets for military forces and rebel groups alike. The weaponization of water has strict historical precedent. During the 1991 Gulf War, oil spills were used to intentionally shut down Kuwait's desalination intake. More recently, we've seen deliberate drone and missile strikes traded between coalitions and rebel factions across Yemen and Saudi Arabia. A megaplant offers no workaround. One precision hit can knock an entire city's water supply offline, and the complexity of these sequential systems means repairs could take months. By centralizing their water production, these nations have effectively weaponized their own geography. When armed conflict breaks out, the physical design of the infrastructure practically guarantees an instant civilian crisis. But you don't need a missile to take a plant offline. The third threat is entirely digital. To squeeze out more efficiency, operators have been connecting legacy physical infrastructure to the modern internet. This exposes operational technology, the industrial networks governing the physical pumps, chemical dosing, and high-pressure valves. These machines were engineered decades ago for brute durability, not for cybersecurity. Hackers know this. In 2024 alone, security firms tracked 80 different ransomware groups operating in the region, with state-linked actors explicitly probing water utilities for structural weaknesses. The implications are severe. A single compromised password could freeze the industrial controls of a megaplant. Without firing a shot, an anonymous attacker could trigger mass water rationing for millions of people within days. Surviving these converging threats requires a massive structural pivot. The region must shift away from the vulnerable megaplant model toward a decentralized network. This means building distributed reverse osmosis facilities, expanding emergency reserve buffers, and powering the grid with green energy. Crucially, that physical overhaul has to be matched digitally. Securing operational technology can't be treated as an IT afterthought. It requires the exact same funding and urgency as critical national defense. Researchers project that by 2050, water stress will reach 100% of the Middle Eastern population, leaving no margin for error if these aging facilities fail. We can rely on international laws that condemn attacks on civilian water supplies, but signatures on a treaty offer zero real-world protection if the physical and digital machinery can't absorb a hit. Oil defined Middle Eastern power in the 20th century, but water will define the 21st. And survival depends entirely on protecting the fragile, irreplaceable machines that create it.